Hello you guys, what is up? Welcome back. My name is Daniela. I'm so happy you're here. It is getting closer to Valentine's Day, and so I thought it would be really fun to chat about a bunch of romance books together. I love reading romance, especially this time of year. I think it's so fun. And so I've gone through and collected 30 romance books that I've read and really enjoyed. All of these books are totally spice-free, closed door. That's my preferred romance style. I'm not really a big open door romance fan, and I know a lot of you guys aren't either. So I collected a bunch of books. I tried to choose ones that aren't as popular and aren't talked about as much, so hopefully you can find some fun new titles. Let's just dive right in. I've divided all of the books into categories. So the first category is grown adults being grown adults, just living their normal lives. In this category, we have got Nora Goes Off Script, Summer Romance, Things You Save in a Fire, The Bookshop on the Corner, Ghosted, The Flatshare, The Switch, Evvie Drake Starts Over, and If I Never Met You. So we're gonna start with the Annabelle Monaghan books, Nora Goes Off Script and Summer Romance. Annabelle Monaghan has 3 books. These are my 2 favorite of the 3 books that she's written. Nora Goes Off Script is about Nora, and she's a screenwriter, and typically she writes like kind of cheesier Hallmark movies, but then she goes through a really traumatic divorce with a really terrible ex-husband and turns that story into a screenplay, which then gets sold to like a huge movie producer, and they come and actually film the movie in her house. Then she meets the lead character who's playing her ex-husband in the movie. They kind of get to know each other, and it's just such a sweet story of Nora kind of coming to her own after her divorce, raising her kids and like still teaching them morals, and like also falling head over heels for this beautiful, attractive movie star and developing these feelings and growing into this relationship. It's so sweet. This is such a comfort read for me. I read it every single year. I love it so much. I also love Summer Romance by Annabelle Monaghan. This is kind of a similar premise. This one is about Allie. Allie is a professional organizer who is fairly recently divorced, and she hasn't worn hard pants in as long as she can remember. And so one day she finally decides, today's the day, I'm gonna get ready, I'm gonna go out there, I'm just gonna feel like a grown-up person again. And so she gets dressed and she takes her dog to the dog park, and her dog immediately goes and pees on a very attractive stranger's foot. And the story goes from there, but this one is so sweet, but it also has so much depth and so much character development and character growth. I loved seeing Allie and Ethan they're both like pretty happy with where they're at in life. They're not from the same town, they don't live in the same place, and they kind of grapple with, okay, well, if everything in my home, like if I live where I want to live but I want to be with this person, like how do I balance that? And just seeing them be adults and communicate and figure things out was just really nice and refreshing. I really liked this one. Then we have Things You Save in a Fire. This is about Cassie, and Cassie lives in Texas, and she's a very celebrated and talented, I don't know, firefighter, but she has to move to Boston, I think it is, because her mother has become very sick, so she has to move back home, and she moves to this firehouse that's in Boston that's like very old school. It's all men. They're not really very open-minded. They don't really want to have a female firefighter on their team. So she's dealing with a lot of hardship because she's taking care of her sick mother at home. Then she's really going through it at work. And so this one has a lot of character depth, and it's definitely one that I would say is kind of like a women's fiction, but still has such a great romance. I really loved the relationship between Cassie and the character that she meets in this book. I think it's really beautifully done. I love Catherine Center's writing and the way that she was able to like weave in so much depth into this story. The Bookshop on the Corner is about Nina, and Nina is a librarian, and she just loves books so much. And then her branch of the library closes down because they don't have enough funding. And so Nina is kind of going through it. She needed a life change anyways, and so she's decided to buy an old van and turn it into like a traveling bookshop. And so she goes ahead and does this, and one thing leads to another, and she ends up in the Scottish Highlands. In the Scottish Highlands, Nina is kind of like selling her books. She's going along, and then she finds herself in a little bit of like a love triangle situation. She's trying to figure out what's best for her, where she wants to be and where she wants to go in her life, and how she wants to grow as a person. And it's a really sweet book, and just like such a cozy read. It's very like you just curl up by the fire on a winter afternoon and read this one nice and slowly. It's not very high stakes at all. Ghosted is about Kennedy and Jonathan. They were high school sweethearts. Then Jonathan becomes a very famous Marvel superhero actor. So he lives in LA and he is doing his superhero thing, and Kennedy has moved back home with their daughter and she's in upstate New York. And so this is like a second chance romance between the two of them, but it's so mature, so grown up, and you really just see how they're like prioritizing their daughter and working through their feelings in a very mature, well, in a mostly very mature way. It's one that I feel like isn't super well talked about, and it's one that I didn't rate super highly when I first read it, but it is one that I think about fondly and I do recommend it. I think it was really well written. Then we have two books by Beth O'Leary. We have The Switch and The Flatshare. The Flatshare is about Tiffy and Leon. Tiffy and Leon have made an agreement where they share an apartment, but they've never met each other, and so Tiffy has the flat from 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. and Leon has the flat from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. because he works shift work, so he works during the night, Tiffy works during the day. They've agreed to share this flat, but they've never met each other and they don't have any really means of communicating with each other, and so they start kind of leaving post-it notes to one another throughout the house. And at first they're kind of like passive aggressive and they're like, hey, can you tidy up, or can you remember to take the garbage out, thank you so much. But then they develop this relationship and it's so sweet and so fun, and they're just two grown-ups kind of living their lives, navigating their lives with so much more going on in the story. And I loved this one so much. I also really loved the TV show adaptation that they did of it. I thought it was so well done. The Switch is about Lena, and Lena is giving a big work presentation one day and she royally messes it up. And so her company is like, you know what? I think you're burnt out. I think it's time for a break. So they give her a like forced 2-month sabbatical. At the same time, her grandmother, who lives in like a small Yorkshire village outside of London where Lena lives, has recently broken up with a man. She's newly single, she's in her 70s, and she's looking for love. And so the two of them decide to make a switch. Lena decides to move to her grandma's home in her small Yorkshire village, and her grandma Eileen decides to move downtown London into Lena's city flat, and they kind of go on their own individual journeys. Then we have Evvie Drake starts over. Evvie is recently widowed. She's in her early 30s, I think. She's kind of getting back on her feet. Everyone thinks that she's grieving her husband, and she's letting them think that, but in reality it was a very different situation at home. And so she's kind of getting back on her feet, getting back into the groove of life. And then her friend kind of throws a situation upon her. He has another friend who is in the MLB, like he's a baseball player, and he's having a little bit of a tough time in the sport. He has like the yips, I think is what it's called, but he needs a break. And so he's kind of invited that friend to stay at Evvie's house because he's like, you have a huge house, you won't see each other, he needs a break, you need to like talk to new people. So Dean comes to stay at Evvie's house while he's in recovery and trying to get back into the game. They develop this really sweet friendship, and they kind of are able to tell each other things that they're not able to tell anybody else because they're complete strangers to one another. I read this one a number of years ago and haven't had the chance to revisit it, but I really would like to read it again soon because I just remember loving it so much. Okay, the last book in this little section is If I Never Met You. This book follows Lori, and Lori has just been broken up with by her long-term partner. I think they were together for well over a decade, and they're both lawyers at the same law firm. They work together. It's just kind of a disaster, kind of a mess. And so Lori decides, like, I need to make it seem like I'm okay. Everyone at work is like, oh, this poor woman, she's not doing well, she's just been dumped, yada yada. And so she's trying to make everyone believe that she's doing okay. And then at the same time, Jamie, another lawyer who works at the firm, is trying to become a partner at the firm, but the partners want someone who's like a dedicated family man who shows that he can be committed. And Jamie's kind of known for not being great at commitment. And so he and Lori decide to strike up a little fake dating situation so that Lori can make everyone think that she's fine, she's doing okay, she's with someone new, she's moved on. And Jamie can be like, look how committed I am, like I'm in a loving relationship, hire me to become partner at this law firm. So I love a fake dating. I feel like it's so fun. And this one was a pretty fun one. Again, I read it years and years ago, so I don't remember every detail, but I remember enjoying it when I read it. Okay, the next category is silly, cutesy fun. These are all adult romances still, but they're just silly. They're not quite as deep and emotional as the last section of books were. They're just a silly little good time. In this section, we've got Waiting for Tom Hanks, Very Sincerely Yours, The Bodyguard, The Blonde Identity, Just Don't Fall, and Dear Henry, Love, Edith. Waiting for Tom Hanks and Very Sincerely Yours are both by Carrie Winfrey. Waiting for Tom Hanks is about Annie. Annie is an aspiring screenwriter and she lives in like Columbus, Ohio, or kind of around there. I think Carrie Winfrey lives in Ohio, and so all of her books are set around Columbus. Annie lives in like a small town outside of the city, I believe, and she's an aspiring screenwriter. And then one day, a huge movie production comes to her small town. And one thing about Annie is that she is waiting for her Tom Hanks. She is obsessed with all of the 90s rom-coms about Tom Hanks, and she's just waiting for that perfect man to find her, run off into the sunset with her. So this movie set comes to town, and one day she's walking kind of near the set. She really wants to be involved because that's her dream career, and she quite literally stumbles into the male movie star of the movie that they're filming, and she's like, ugh, he's terrible. He's so rude to her. She's like, he is not Tom Hanks coded. Like, this is not it. And then they just happen to keep running into each other, and he kind of tries to make it up to her because he was just in a bit of a situation that day. He wasn't in a very good mood and he feels bad. And so the story then goes on from there. I will say there is one scene towards the end that kind of icked me. It was a little bit weird, but overall, it's a sweet book. It's a funny book. Carrie Winfrey is great at the romantic comedy. Like, they are genuinely funny. Very Sincerely Yours is about Teddy and Everett. Teddy is working at this toy store. She doesn't really know what she wants to do with her life. She's kind of stuck. She's kind of lost. And so she decides to write to Everett, who has this like children's show where he gives these children wonderful advice. And she's like, I wonder if he would have advice for me, you know? He's like a nice man. Maybe he can tell me what I should do next with my life. So they start email correspondence, and it kind of goes from there. And this one is really, really sweet and just silly and a lot of fun. It also goes through like all of the holidays. I think it starts in like September, and you have Halloween and Christmas and New Year's and all of that fun stuff. So this one is a really, really sweet, silly little romance. Then we have The Bodyguard. This is one that I'm sure you've probably heard of because everyone is talking about it. This book and Things You Save in the Fire are the only two Catherine Center books that I've personally read, but I really loved both of them. I think they were both 5 stars for me. The Bodyguard is about Hannah and Jack, and Hannah is a female bodyguard and Jack is a very famous celebrity that's been dealing with some stalker threats lately. But Jack is going home for Thanksgiving to visit his family, and he doesn't want to freak out his mom to think that he needs a bodyguard. And so Hannah and Jack fake date and go to his parents' like ranch for Thanksgiving. And it's very silly, very sweet, very fun. Fake dating, you know, I love it. Okay, in The Blonde Identity, Zoe wakes up at the beginning and she is being like hunted down by Russian spies. And she's like, who am I? Where am I? What's going on? I don't remember any of this. Then a very attractive mystery man kind of like swoops in and saves her. And together they kind of realize, oh, she's not who she's supposed to be, but she has no idea who she is, who's after her, or why. This book is pure, just silly goofiness. It is not like a perfect read, but if you grew up, especially if you grew up reading Ally Carter and like the Gallagher Girls and the other one that was about like the thieves, I loved those books growing up. So this was just like an adult hit of nostalgia to those books. I believe there's also a second book in this series coming out this year, and I think these are just so fun, like mindless reads. Okay, then we have Just Don't Fall. Just Don't Fall is a second chance again. This is with Parker and Logan, and Parker is a social media manager at her like local hockey team. Yeah. And then Logan is like this big shot NHL player, and he's kind of going through some stuff. He gets in trouble, and so he gets demoted to this I think it's called the AHL. It's like the league below the NHL. He gets demoted to this team. He has to move back to his hometown, and they are reunited. They grew up together. They were childhood best friends, and then Logan kind of left mysteriously when he went to the NHL, never said goodbye, never spoke to them again. They kind of have to navigate now, like just meeting each other and kind of getting to know each other as adults for the first time, but also kind of putting the pieces back together from their childhood and what went wrong. This book is very sweet. It is so cheesy. Like, the town is literally called Harvest Hollow, I think. Everything is very autumnal and very, very silly. Parker has also never been kissed by anyone before, and so it also talks about that a little bit. And so this is just like a very sweet, silly little romance. Okay, lastly in this section, I have Dear Henry and Love Edith. This one, in my opinion, is by far the silliest. I think this is considered a Christian romance because I think they like go to church in it. I don't think there's much like faith content necessarily, but they do definitely talk about church and stuff. But in this book, we have Henry and Edith has to rent a room from Henry, but Edith is told, oh, Henry, like, he has to walk on a cane, he can't go upstairs, he's only in the downstairs. And so she's like, oh, it's like this poor injured old man that's like renting me his house. And then Henry is told that Edith is a new widow, which she is, and she's coming to volunteer in their town, which she is. And so he assumes that she's an old lady because she's a widow. Both of them are in their 30s though, and so they each think that the other is an old person and that they're talking, they like write notes to one another and they think that the other person's old, but they're actually the same age. And so it's just really silly, but I sped through this one and I had a really good time with it. I think it was sweet, it was fun, and just perfect for like a mindless, silly read. My next category is Regency romances. I feel like a lot of Regency romances are very spicy, but here are 3 that I've read that I've really liked that are closed door. We've got The Ladies Rewrite the Rules, A Lady's Guide to Fortune Hunting, and A Lady's Guide to Scandal. The Ladies Rewrite the Rules is about Miss Diana. She is a recent widow. She's in her late 20s, and one day a few men knock on her door and they're trying to win her over. They're trying to woo her. And she's like, where did these people come from? How did they find me? I don't even live in London. I live out here in the country. How do they know about me? So her butler kind of does some digging for her and finds that there's been a guide made up for the younger siblings of London. And this is a guide of affluent women who are either widowed or unmarried so that they can go and be essentially fortune hunting in reverse. And so Diana finds this out and she's like, this is ridiculous. So she goes to the guy who creates this guide and she's like, what is wrong with you? Why would you do this? And then she kind of like tries to collect all of the women that are in the guide and she's like, hey, I just want you to know that this is what's going on. Like, all these gold diggers are coming after us. And so they kind of band together and they decide they're gonna play everyone back. Then we have A Lady's Guide to Fortune Hunting. This book is one of my 6-star reads. I love it so much. This is by Sophie Irwin, and I think she's great at writing a Regency romance. She does a fantastic job. This one is about Kitty. Kitty is the eldest daughter of 5, and her parents have now both passed away, and they've passed away and left them in a mountain of debt. Kitty was supposed to get married, but then her fiance called it off, and so now she has weeks to find a husband, otherwise her and her sisters are gonna lose their home. And so she moves to London and she kind of like enters London society, and she's trying to find the wealthiest and dumbest man that she can marry as soon as possible so that she can save her sisters, save her family, and then hopefully, even though she has to marry out of obligation, hopefully her sisters will be able to marry for love in the future. Kitty's character is so like eldest daughter coded, and I really, really loved this one. Maybe I like aligned with her because of that. She kind of like finds this man that she is like, okay, I'm gonna woo him and I'm gonna get him. And then his older brother finds out that he's been courting this girl, and he immediately is like, oh no, she's a gold digger, like she's a fortune hunter. She's coming after the family wealth. And so he's trying to stop her. She's trying to win over the brother and get him to propose. It's very chaotic, but it's very silly and very, very fun. Then we have A Lady's Guide to Scandal. A Lady's Guide to Scandal is about Eliza, and Eliza is like 28 or 29, and she has found herself to be a recent widow. She was forced into her marriage when she was a teenager, and she didn't really have a good marriage. She didn't get along great with her husband. He wasn't a very nice person, but he has left her a lot of money under the condition that She doesn't spoil the family name. As soon as she goes and is like reckless and silly, then his next heir kind of takes all of the fortune from her. But as long as she's well behaved, she gets to keep everything. And so she decides that she wants to figure out who she is in life. Now she has all of this time. She's got loads of money, more than she could ever possibly need, and she decides to move with her cousin to Bath and try to get to know herself and figure out who she wants to be at this next point in life. Of course, she winds up in a little bit of a love triangle situation. There's also just so much character depth and so much growing up. It's such a sweet, sweet book. This one is, I think, not as strong as A Lady's Guide to Fortune Hunting, but still such an enjoyable book. The next category is teenage yearning. So these ones are all YA books. I have What to Say Next, Tell Me Three Things, Well That Was Unexpected, 1,000 Heartbeats, Begin Again, and Tweet Cute. What to Say Next and Tell Me Three Things are both by Julie Buxbaum. What to Say Next is about Kit and David. Kit's father recently passed away, and so she's not really fitting in with her friends anymore because she's got all these new feelings, all of this stuff that she's processing that's going on. And one day she decides to sit down at David's lunch table instead. David eats lunch alone every day. He doesn't really have any friends except for his sister. And so when Kit sits down with him, he's like, oh, hi. And they start chatting and they develop this friendship, and it is very, very, very sweet. David is on the autism spectrum and they just kind of chat together. He is very open in a way that most teenagers aren't. And so Kit finds it really easy to talk to him, and they just are able to like chat and process their feelings and grow together. Then we have Tell Me Three Things. This one I absolutely loved and ate up the first time I read it. I do want to read it again and see if it's still like a 5-6-star read for me. But this is about Jessie, and Jessie has just lost her mom, and about 6 months after her mom passes away, she gets moved with her dad to Beverly Hills, where he's moving in with his new wife or girlfriend. And she's like, whoa, 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 we just lost mom, like how are you moving on? How is this already happening? And so she's really going through a lot of grief. And then she goes to this new Beverly Hills prep school where everyone is so LA and she is not. And she is just hating her experience so much. One day she gets an email and it's from an anonymous person, and they're like, oh, I'm gonna be your guide. I'm gonna help you get adjusted into this high school, get to know the things you need to know, and just help you adjust and settle in here. And so they start emailing back and forth, and they develop this very sweet relationship over text. The person that's emailing Jessie obviously knows it's her, but she doesn't know who the person is that she's emailing. But she's also developing a bit of a relationship with a few different people in high school. She's getting to know people slowly over the course of the year. She's making friends, she's getting better, and it's such a sweet book about growing up and going through grief, and I really loved it. Then we have Well, That Was Unexpected. This book is so silly. This book is about Charlotte and George Clooney, and Charlotte and George Clooney are both kind of being catfished by their parents. The book opens and Charlotte is caught by her mom in a compromising position with her boyfriend, and her mom is like, no way, this is not okay, this is not happening, and decides that they're gonna move from LA back to Indonesia for the summer so that Charlotte can learn to become a proper Indonesian girl. In that time, she signs Charlotte up for like a little dating service, like a teenage dating app that they use there, and she is talking to this boy, and she's like, Charlotte, you're gonna go out with this boy. And then Charlotte goes out with this boy who is in the same situation because his dad has decided you need to find a girlfriend that she needs to be a proper girl. And so he also goes on this dating app for his son. And so the mom and the dad are talking to each other, catfishing each other, pretending to be the kids. And then the kids have to like meet up and become friends in real life. That explanation probably sounds so far-fetched and weird, but it was well written and it was silly, and I had a good time with it. Then we have 1,000 Heartbeats by Kira Cass. I don't even know how to explain this book in a way that doesn't spoil it. Like in the back, there is no description. And I feel like that's just kind of the best way to go into it. It's very like princess, knight in shining armor, battle. Like, this is like a teenage, like a YA romantasy book. I really liked it. I feel like Kira Cass has the most bingeable writing. Like, you can just eat up her books in no time at all. And I thought this was such a fun story. I was so invested in the plot and I loved the characters. I loved the growth and the dynamic of the characters. But again, not really one that I can describe super well, but I really had a good time when I read this one. Okay, lastly, I have 2 Emma Lord books to recommend. I've read all of Emma Lord's backlist, I think. She's just a pretty reliable YA romance author for me. I feel like all of her books have been enjoyable, but the 2 that I chose to put on this list are Tweet Cute and Begin Again. Tweet Cute is about Pepper and Jack, and they both run their companies, their families' companies' Twitter accounts, and they're in this huge Twitter war online, but neither of them knows it's the other, and they actually go to high school together. And so they're fighting online because they both claim to own this like famous grilled cheese recipe, and they're like, the other person is lying. And so like their families have competing businesses, but then at school they don't know that it's them kind of competing on Twitter, and they get pushed into like group projects together and they develop this friendship at school. Begin Again is actually like a new adult book, I think. This is about Andy, and she has just started college and she's kind of following in her mom's footsteps. Her mom passed away when she was a kid, and so she is going to this community college that she went to, and she's trying to figure out more about her mom and kind of trying to find that connection to her mom as she grows up. It's definitely the most mature out of the group. It's really just about growing up and finding yourself. The romance is very sweet. There's lots of like confusion and like, is this where I want to be? Is this who I want to be? And I really liked it for the story, and I really liked it for the romance. I thought the romance was really very sweet. And because it's in college, it does feel like a little bit more grown up than some of the high school YA ones. Okay, this is my last section, and it is crumbs. Like, these are just not even romance books at all. They just have like the teeniest little hint of romance, and I ate it. I feel like the books that aren't romance, that have just like that little bit of romance, they always have so much yearning and tension, and those are always the best ones. I love the yearning. In this section, we have A Cruel Prince, Assistant to the Villain, The Naturals, Six of Crows, and Heist Society. Okay, my camera is gonna die, so we have to do this quickly. The Cruel Prince is not a romance. This is a fantasy trilogy. This has like fae and humans, and the first book, you're like, there's no way this is gonna become a romance. But oh, it does. The crumbs are so small. Like, this is a fantasy series. It is not even a romantasy series. But the romance, oh, I ate it up. Then we have my most recent read of all of these on this list, which is Six of Crows. I ate this book up. This is a duology. I haven't read the second book yet. I loved this so much. The yearning and the tension in this book was so expertly written, so well done. I love it. I recommend it to everyone. Then we have Assistant to the Villain. Again, crumbs. This book is about Evie, and she is looking for a new job when she quite literally runs into the villain of her village, and he's hiring an assistant. So she becomes the assistant to the villain, and they go around and they are doing all sorts of villainous things, but it is, I would say, morally gray. Did the power go out? Anyways, the whole thing is very morally gray because you don't know who the villain really is. Is he actually a villain, or is he a good guy? Then we have The Naturals. The Naturals is about Cassie. Cassie is a natural at reading people. She gets picked up by the FBI and moved to DC, where she lives with a group of teenagers, and they are working on cold cases from the FBI from like way back in the 80s and 90s, and trying to use their skills to solve them so that they can eventually grow up and become FBI agents. It's a group of teenagers in one house, so there's a lot of drama, there's a lot of tension, and there is quite a love triangle. I've again only read the first book in this series, but I do want to continue reading the rest of this series. I really liked the first book a lot. My last book is another Ali Carter book. This one is Heist Society. This one is about a group of like, I think, teenage thieves. Like, it's a whole family of thieves, and so they all go on different missions and steal things. I have not read these books since I was like 14, so to be honest, no idea if they would hit the same as an adult. This may be such a non-recommendation, to be honest, but when I was a teenager, and if you're younger like YA, I ate these up. I loved them so much. The romance is like crumbs. There is no romance basically, but I was there for those characters. I loved it it so much. Alrighty, those are my romance closed door book recs. Let me know if you've read any of them. Let me know what your favorite closed door romances are. I would love to have some more recommendations. I'm sure everyone would love to have some more recommendations. So if you have some, leave them in the comments for sure. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for being here. I love ya, and I will hopefully see you in the next one. Bye.